It's good afternoon to the Sportsfan radio panel, and a terrific day for Australian tennis with Nick Kyrgios playing in the men's final at Wimbledon tonight. But we've got Roddy Reynolds back on, and thanks for joining us again, Roddy. We might start off, though, with Ileana Tomljanovic being beaten in the quarters. Still a great effort to get that far.
Thank you for having me. Yes, really good effort. I think the thing with Tomljanovic is, it's been proven now. It takes a seriously good player on the grass to knock her over. It was Ash last year who obviously lifted the trophy, and this year it was Rybakina. I think that, as we spoke about, Tomljanovic's game is one of small margins. She hits the ball very flat. She's a bit like Rybakina herself. But look, great week, great result. It's a pity she'll drop in the rankings with her quarterfinal result of last year coming off, and then obviously not being able to add to it this year. But she's doing great things, and hopefully it's a second quarterfinal and not her last.
Probably disappointing to see that at the press conference after her match. It's a great effort to get to the quarterfinals, but the reporters leading off with questions about Nick Kyrgios. Yeah,
definitely. I think what was so disappointing about that particular comment, or the question, and for anyone that doesn't know, Isla's just matched her career best performance at Wimbledon. She would be bitterly disappointed to have let the opportunity slip after winning the first set. She walks into the presser, and then a journo says, he said, "I'm sorry, I don't know I shouldn't ask you about this, but I'm going to ask you about it anyway. What was it like being with Nick?" Basically, did he ever hit you was what he was asking. And I think the fact that the journo knew it was such a poor thing to do, and then to do it anyway, just sums up I don't know. It felt grubby to me. It felt gross. I didn't like it for a second. And it's a real shame that for something that was so good, like her performance was so good, it was such a great thing to see her get that far, for that to be the first thing she's asked about, that's got to sting.
Should it be now that press conferences after the game, because they are compulsory, and we've seen the Japanese player, feign injury to get out of playing and that because she finds it so much pressure. Should there be kind of perimeters that they can only ask about the game that they've just come from, rather than, anything outside of that? Should that be something Wimbledon, the Australian Open, that if you're an accredited journalist to come to these press conferences, you are only allowed to discuss that game?
I don't think the parameters should be that tight. I think that you should be able to ask questions that feed into like certain storylines. So people's backgrounds, their journey, their experiences, their thoughts, their views. That's all good. It's just got to be a common sense rule. I was in Alex Vukic at the Aussie Open after his first round match, his first Grand Slam win. I was in that presser, and there was I believe it was Herald Sun journo or News Corp journo who came in, and the first thing she asked was, she tried to get him to nibble on the whole Djokovic saga with the deportation and all that. And Vukic basically said, "I don't want to have a bar of that. Next question." She got up and left the press conference. And then later that day, I'm in another press conference. She walks in, is asking for the same question to get different quotes from everyone. Does or does not get an answer, depending on whether the player feels like it, walks out and leaves. And being there in that moment, it left a really bitter taste in my mouth. And I can only imagine what the players must think and feel.
So is that the accreditation? Like, coming from, a Fox type thing or a News World kind of thing, only have the tennis journalists there rather than someone trying to get a front page story?
I don't hate the idea. It'd be easier for me to get in more often. But I think that it should probably be incumbent upon the organising event to tap people on the shoulder and say, "Hey, that's not good enough. One more and you're out." I think that we don't want to necessarily bar people from covering the sport and providing exposure to the players and their stories and their journey. But I just think that it's a fine line. Like you can't be doing that sort of stuff. And maybe it's a one strike policy. I don't know.
The players need to learn from the Daniel Andrews playbook. I'm not here today to answer questions about that. and then well, it is a press conference, but and then move on.
Yeah, a bit in that. I don't mind that idea.
Judge, I'm sure you've got some opinion about this.
I have, funnily enough, Professor. Well, firstly, you're talking about journalists, and this fellow was from the London Times. If he's a journalist, I'm an Eskimo. He was put there to simply muck rake as much as he could about something which had absolutely nothing at all to do with the tennis, which, as you say, Roddy, it was a repeat of her quarter-final performance last year. She then establishes herself as one of the 8 best grass court tennis players in the world. So let's put the perspective about that, about what a wonderful result it would be, and a wonderful result for her, because she's probably waited for this all her life, to be able to reach, such great heights. And so what does the journalist come out with? The old trope of women as partners, girlfriends, can I suggest whores? That's the old trope, that women are just ancillary to men. They're just men's partners. I think the Professor used the word men's chattels. You wouldn't try this kind of question on a man, but it's allowed for women. And the fact that it's the first question which is asked, the outrage level is basically zero. The only outrage is expressed by Tomljanovic herself. And I just think it's disgusting. And I think this whole concept of so-called press conferences, but Roddy, that's not press. To me, journalism has got a very proud tradition, a very respected tradition. In fact, there's a degree in journalism. You just can't call yourself a journalist just because you've got a social media blog. And so when we say, oh, these are a journalist from the Times, he was sent there with the express job of making life uncomfortable for Tomljanovic and for Kyrgios, and to make another headline. Because Kyrgios is an automatic headline maker wherever he goes. But to foist the Kyrgios issue on Tomljanovic, I think it's disgusting. And I'm surprised there hasn't been more outrage. But it wouldn't matter if you sacked that journo, by the way, Roddy. They'll just send the next foot soldier along to rake some more muck, sorry. And I thought it was a very low point in so-called journalism, sports journalism, but you only get these low points in sports journalism with women. And frankly, I'm just sick of it. I know it's the way the social media works. I know there's going to get some headlines. Bugger that for a game of soldiers. Sports journalism should focus on the sport, not on women.
It is interesting. It was from The Sun, The Age, which is a reputable paper, having lived there before. If it was The Sun, it probably would have had her in her bikini washing the car or something underneath an article about it. So it's on a serious note. The Age is normally a more, I almost say, highbrow paper, as opposed to the muckrakers that still have the page 3 girls over there in England.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I agree with all that's been said. It was just so ordinary, such poor form. And you're right. It comes from above that particular journalist. They get tapped on the shoulder. You need to ask this. You need to say that, and it'll happen. It'll happen again soon, which is a shame. And that person is just doing their job. So you can understand that they may have felt obliged or pressured to do that. I don't really know what to say.
Well, it's also turning the, I don't like the expression, but the hallowed walls of Wimbledon into a tawdry extension of the Nick Kyrgios story. He's called in the Age today a disruptor. It's a new word for a lot of other words we've used for Kyrgios. But all we're focusing on now through the media is sensationalism. I call it the TikTok generation. They can't stand watching a 5-set game of tennis, but they will stand, reading a 30-second article about Kyrgios. So, and that's where this kind of questioning of Tomljanovic comes from. I ask for a better quality, a higher quality, but I'm afraid we're just not going to get it, Professor.
It's all clickbait.
Coutta, you came in on the tail end of that conversation. What were your thoughts about that press conference?
Well, I know exactly who we're referring to, and unfortunately, the first question should have been, about congratulating her on making back-to-back Wimbledon quarterfinals. Now, she lost in 3 sets, played well, and I would think that this is the standard that she plays to. So I think you expect it from the Daily Mail or sort of the Picture magazine or one of these sorts of comics, that sort of question. And Roddy, I know you said he's doing his job, but you've got to have some integrity in what you're doing, don't you? And that's, I don't think there's any integrity in that question whatsoever.
Agreed.
So, but no, we should actually be talking about her performance, how all of a sudden she's showing that she's going to be the #1 Australian going forward. And I think if you watched her play, she was aggressive. Her backhand is a really, really good weapon. And I think that she's got the game to maybe be a top 10 sort of player.
Coutta, has she got a weakness in that she's slightly, what seems to me, one-dimensional in the sense that she's a very hard hitter. And we're used to seeing, Ash Barty, who's multi-dimensional player. She doesn't seem to have a short game, or certainly not a great short game, certainly not a serve and volley game. And I just wonder at Wimbledon, if she mixed that up a little bit, she could actually be a real weapon on the women's circuit.
Yeah, well, I think the thing, though, Judge, and we talked about it last week, and I think is that what players actually play multi-dimensional. Now, there was a girl, I'm trying to think of her name. I think she made the semis, who plays slice forehand and slice backhand. And that's just something totally different to what the others are playing. But not many volley. The slice backhand, I don't think is a hell of a weapon in women's tennis, apart from what Ash had. She would use it. So, yeah, she is, catch that. She is one-dimensional, but at the same time, I think she's got the weapons to be able to go further. Nice serve, good forehand and backhand. One thing you might say is her court mobility isn't a weapon, and I think that's probably something across the board. But no, I think she's got the game to be able to be a top 10 player, I would think. And there's no, it's just been proven. Swiatek, obviously, we thought would win the tournament, didn't. But other than that, though, the top 10 or top 20, Roddy, is probably wide open, isn't it?
Yeah, agreed. I think that when it comes to Tomljanovic, she doesn't have a ton of variety. But in that first set against Rybakina, she was throwing in the backhand slice a fair bit. And granted, there aren't that many, I guess, lethal backhand slices in the women's game. But it is so effective because it's not seen so much. It can really cut people apart. I remember watching Ash's final last year, and I was begging for her to come over the top of her backhand because she didn't hit a topspin backhand the entire day. Shows what I know, that the result, the proof was in the pudding on that one. But Tomljanovic did use it a little bit, wasn't able to unsettle Rybakina enough, and Ons Jabeur suffered the same fate last night. So, I mean, no shame going down. It would be good to see her add a bit more variety to her game, but yeah, it is the way women's tennis is played a lot at the moment. They're very flat, hard hitters.
Well, she lost again to the winner of the tournament, so that's something to hang her hat on. Going forward to the US, how will she go on a different surface than grass? More the volleys and more the long rallies and things like that. Do you think she's got the game to do it? And of course, this year being an odd year with no points for Wimbledon, her ranking really won't change, will it?
Well, her ranking will go down because she'll lose the quarterfinal points she had from last year, and she's not able to replace them with anything. So she will be at the mercy of the draw when it comes to bigger events going forward. But I like her chances on hard court. I think she's probably, for all her success on grass, she may in fact be more comfortable on hard courts. The US Open will be a quicker court than what they're playing at Wimbledon at the moment because it's a very slow grass court. It still skids through. I mean, grass is fast, but it is just slower. I like her chances of putting together a few wins at the US, subject to the draw. I mean, she won't be seeded unless she wins a Masters or 500 event in the lead-in. So, I mean, she could have Swiatek, Ons Jabeur, Halep, anyone in the first round. So, with a bit of luck, I'd back her in.
That's good.
Now, Roddy, the winner of the women's. Lucky that she made the change from Russian background to Kazakh, because that enabled her to be in the tournament and win and beat the Tunisian. So how did you see last night's match?
Very intriguing last night. I think that Rybakina, for all her success this fortnight, and it's been known for a while, big hitter, big game, a lot of talent and all that sort of thing. But if I'm not mistaken, she hadn't won a title on the WTA tour, having gone through the futures circuit and all that sort of thing. So definitely a surprise. She did have a big win against Serena at the French last year that got her into a quarterfinal. So everyone knew the game was there. But I thought that Ons Jabeur, who I would have thought would clean her up, to be honest, Ons, other than the first set, looked out of ideas. And the one thing with Jabeur is she's very crafty, loves the slice forehand, loves the drop shot, lobs. Really great player to watch. But for all the options in her arsenal, none of them were working. And I felt like as the match went on, the only way that Ons thought she could win a point if her serve was returned was to throw in a drop shot. I'm not sure what the numbers were, but there was a large number of occasions where she was trying to bring Rybakina into the net. And to be honest, it didn't really work. She looked a bit out of sorts. Rybakina was in the zone. It must have, being inside her head last night would have been a lot of fun. She was seeing it like a beach ball. So not what I expected, but Jabeur just had no answers.
What were your thoughts on the game, Coutta?
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? Because the game styles were different. But I just watched it, and there was no sort of, I used plan B, but there was nothing that she changed last night to get to that stage where you thought that she might turn the tide. If you're like another player, you might have tried some other things. But I think, as Roddy sort of said, it was just same. And if it didn't work, then she was going to die by the sword. Was it a good final? I was okay. I don't think it's going to go in the record books as one of the great finals. And what it does do, and as I said before, I think it just highlights that women's tennis is pretty open at the moment. Swiatek obviously won. Sorry,
Coota, I was just going to agree with you. And I just wonder whether women's tennis is at the moment as open and as interesting as it's been in the last 20 years. Given that we've had a player like Serena who's genuinely dominated the game, probably like no other woman probably ever, including Margaret Court. Now there's all these players that are just popping up from everywhere, even players that even haven't won on the tour, Roddy, who are now winning majors. Are we witnessing a real regime change in women's tennis, and B, something to look forward to when the big four drop out in the next 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, Coota, I'm not sure what your thoughts are on this. Maybe you can top me up here, but I think it's great. It's exciting. I mean, for those that aren't tennis fans, it's probably a little bit hard to follow at times. You go, oh, who's this? What have they done? What do I know about them? And especially when a lot of the names, they're not household names, I guess, in that sense. But it is exciting. You can go to a tournament, you genuinely have no idea what's going to happen. I think that it's great. And men's tennis, I think it will certainly trend more towards that. It just has to. I mean, sooner or later, for all the talk of the next generation in men's tennis, they're still yet to really do it. The only time that a next gen sort of players won a Grand Slam was when Novak was defaulted one, and then the other one was when he sort of capitulated with the weight of a calendar Grand Slam on his shoulders. So it'll eventually get there in the men's game. In saying that, Alcaraz looks as likely as any to sort of fill that void of the big three or the big four. So it'll certainly be more open in the future, but probably not to the same extent.
There's a lot of good Scrabble hands playing in women's tennis, though. A lot of Zs and Ys and Okavers and sorts of all these different names. There's no Smiths running around, is there, that I can see? Certainly interesting. But the men's side of it is even, like, Kyrgios has made the final, and obviously Nadal, unfortunately, couldn't take his spot. But what this is showing is that Djokovic has made the final, obviously. You had Nadal make the semi. you had Cam Norrie, who has a big game, push Djokovic. You saw Sinner push Djokovic in the quarters, and possibly Roddy, 2 sets to love up. Djokovic took a break, and the momentum did swing. So I think the men's possibly will open up a little bit, but the professionalism of Djokovic and the ability to make final after final, he's now made the most Grand Slam finals, takes over from Roger, and it's a record that you'd see hard to beat going forward.
Perhaps, Roddy, we can, Couta's pointed us towards the men's final. Does Kyrgios have the game to beat Djokovic?
Yes. He's never lost a set to Novak. They've played twice and Kyrgios got him both times. He has the game. He has the firepower, the variety, the unpredictability, all those things that make Nick Nick. They're the ingredients that you need to be able to beat someone like Djokovic. On the note of the next gen and sort of Novak and Rafa, one of the great certainties at the moment in men's tennis is that these kids keep getting opportunities to beat these guys and they keep missing them. So whether Nick will fall to that, I don't know. If this was a 3-set match, I'd be backing Nick in. Like this occasion seems fit for him. He seems to have matured a lot recently. For years, we heard from Nick how his idea of fun was a 3rd round or 4th round at a Grand Slam and then a couple of nights on the cans. Whereas in the last couple of weeks, he's, I feel, allowed himself to say, you know what, I'm interested in this. I want to win this. And I think there's an argument that there's a fear of failure element that he might be overcoming, or he's allowing himself to dream, or whatever it might be. But that mental shift will be the biggest thing for Nick, because the game's there and everyone knows that. Other than the mental side, what I get worried about with this match is Nick's legs. He's a lot fitter than he's been, and you can see it in his face and his physique. He looks like he's a couple of kilos lighter than what he had been in the last few years. But does he, and he has a great 5-set record, but I feel that he gets a really good 5-set record because he allows people to take him to 5 sets that have no business doing so. And so I feel it's a little bit distorted because of that. But does he have the legs against Novak over 5 hours? He'd want to wrap it up quickly, I think.
I was just going to ask, it's not a popularity contest, but I was watching one of my favourite shows, Pardon the Interruption, on one of the ESPN shows. And the main host, Tony Kornheiser, I think his name is, he literally said everybody hates Kyrgios. Now, maybe in America he's not overly liked, but I was intrigued by Kyrgios's comment that the only Australian tennis fraternity member to reach out to him was Leighton Hewitt. So not even a simple good luck or whatever. It does sound like it's quite entrenched, and perhaps he can go some way to winning those people over tonight. I'm not as worried about the American audience, but it is interesting, the Australian tennis fraternity, it seems so entrenched against him.
Yeah, correct. I think that if I was to put myself in Nick's shoes and try and imagine what that would be like, that would be a source of great frustration for me too. I mean, obviously he's off, or he's on court, but not his playing. I guess his behaviours and his antics rub people the wrong way. And there are a lot of past greats who prefer the game as the gentleman's game that so many people associate with tennis. But Nick's from a different generation. He speaks to a different audience. He sees it as entertainment, not sport. It is a shame that he's probably not. He doesn't feel he's welcomed with open arms by the tennis greats. But who knows? People can change, and he's growing and he's changing. So maybe there's room there.
What do you guys think of his comments? I heard him being interviewed by Tony Jones, and I think he gets in front of himself. Like Ash Barty didn't say anything, and all of a sudden she retires out of the blue. He said in this Tony Jones interview that if he wins it, he may retire due to the lack of respect he's getting from what he called people in Tennis Australia. So, and as you said, if no one's helping, it was just a rather odd comment to say, like, let's get it over and done with first and win it. Then if you want to look at what you're doing, then do it. But
Gelding,
it might have just been something he said off the top.
Why this is Nick Kyrgios, who doesn't do anything conventionally, Gelding. His press conferences are, I would say, they're interesting. The chats with Tony Jones, like, I think the reporting by Tony Jones at Wimbledon's been appalling. There's been a couple of his interviews. Like, he tried door stopping Nick on the way to practice the other day, hung his microphone in his face, and then wondered why he didn't get interviewed. There's a lot of stage management from Tony Jones, and I just found some of the stuff he's done to be disrespectful. But getting back to Kyrgios, is that when he plays Davis Cup, he's a great teammate. They all want him to play Davis Cup. He plays the Labour Cup. They all like him in that format. So there's this perception that he's not a good bloke or he's not good for team harmony or anything like that. I think that's probably an injustice to Nick. Lane Hewitt works hard with most of the Australian players. Obviously, Leighton has his favourites, and we've talked about that on this show before. I know Roddy has with Brett Phillips as well. But Nick, for all his detractors, does things his own way. Like the red shoes and the red hat on centre court. Now, who knows what he's going to wear tonight? Like, he might roll out in a pair of clown shoes tonight and then put his white shoes on when he gets onto court. He does things differently. And like, as we said, he's appealing to a totally different demographic. And he's super popular. Like tonight, do you think he engages with the crowd or he doesn't? Because I think if he engages with the crowd, Djokovic then feeds off that. He feeds off being disliked.
I think he's getting he gets good following in England. As the Giraffe said, the Americans are something different. But I think what the perception seems to be during this tournament is a lot of the English crowd like the larrikin part of him and the showmanship and things like that, as long as it doesn't go too far.
Roddy, can I just suggest that you mentioned fear of failure? Let me put this to you. Fear of success. After his quarter-final loss, I'd never seen Nick so quiet. You would have seen him sitting up beside the court, contemplative. Like the moment it hit him, I've done something momentous here. I've actually joined the adults world now. I've always trashed talk, but really this actually means a lot to me. You get a Wimbledon final, centre court, 5-setter, Djokovic, the king of the 5-set matches, who can't be beaten by all of the antics that Nick goes on with. He won't be put off by that. He doesn't blow him away in 3 sets. Kyrgios doesn't blow him away in 3 sets. It's now a 5-set grind. I think Nick's head will start to get to him after a while, where he'll do what Greg Norman used to do in majors. Gee, if I don't watch out, I'm going to bloody win this thing. And then he used to lose them, despite the fact he was overwhelmingly the best golfer in the world at that time. I just wonder whether you think the mental side will actually get to Nick more so than Djokovic.
Really interesting question. I think that when it comes to Nick, he's obviously it appears clear that he has refused to apply himself, because if he applies himself and people see it, then it will be known that he's actually giving this a red hot go. And if he doesn't succeed, well, then he can just say, well, I never applied myself. My idea of fun, something different. That narrative is now changing. I wouldn't be surprised if some way, somehow, we see a blow up tonight, or we see him start talking to his coach's box and revealing his thoughts, and they may be good, they may be bad, but I think we can expect that. The one thing about Nick is, though, he is in the moment in everything he does. Now, he might lose his cool, but he's still in what he would define as the moment. And so I've never really seen him choke, which is, I guess, what we're getting at here.
Yep.
And if he can keep his serve going, it would be hard for him to choke, I guess. Although, Novak being one of, if not the greatest returner of all time, will have something to say about that. But yeah, I think it'll get to him. But I don't know if it'll get to him to the point that it would cause him to choke if he was in that position. In saying that, who could possibly know what it's like other than those that have done it before? So it's a best guess from me there.
I would have thought temperamentally, Roddy, that Kyrgios would be the last person I'd be worried about in not being able to cope with the situation, because he seems to be able to come to grips with it. He might have his blow-ups, but he always seems to be in control of himself as to what he wants to try and get out of it. He might be beaten, but he's always put in his best effort as far as he's concerned. So I've got no problem with him rising to the occasion. It's just whether he's good enough to beat Djokovic.
Yeah, I'd agree. He'd be more likely to tank than choke. And what are the odds of tanking tonight? But yeah, I'd agree with that.
I love the engagement with his box. He'll sometimes yell at them for not saying anything. Then he'll tell them to be quiet. So they're probably wondering, well, are we supposed to say something? Is he going to shout at us in front of 1 billion people if I say something? I'd be nervous in the box.
What he needs is one of those hand signals you see the doubles players do behind their back, where they give a little signal, what speed, what location you want to serve. He needs that, give me this, give me that. This is what I want.
Well, I remember Andy Murray got his mum out of the box, because the last thing you want is your mum, after you've hit a bad forehand, you have to, sorry, mum. Mum's beady eyes on you missing a backhand, but it's a different dynamic there with his box.
Coutta, who do you think will win tonight and why?
I was looking at this earlier. Geez, you'd love to see Nick win it, and just for the unconventional sake of it, and it gives Australian tennis a shot in the arm. And after last night's men's doubles victory and the tournament that those two boys have had, wouldn't it be amazing? So I don't. As Roddy said, the serve, Kyrgios serve, is what will drive the match. If he serves a high percentage of first serves and makes the corners or hits the lines, he won't drop serve, or he'll struggle to. Sorry, Novak will struggle to break his serve. So that's what we've got to watch. Oh my goodness. So that's what we've got to watch. The return of serve from Djokovic is obviously one of his great weapons. So you've got a big serve against a great returner. So I think it'll be 4 sets to Djokovic. I think, like as we've said, I doubt Kyrgios will go down wondering. He'll take it on. He'll try and do everything he can to win the tournament. There'll be blow-ups. But I'll tell you what, it'll be good to watch, I think. And, geez, if he gets on a run, he could win. It's one of those things, isn't it, where we're sort of talking about Nick as you just love to see him win it. Like, yeah, I don't think he will, but, yeah.
Roddy, your thoughts?
My head says Djokovic in 4. His experience in doing this on this court, it feels almost insurmountable. I was writing yesterday, Djokovic has won 47 of his last 49 matches at Wimbledon, and he's won his last 37 matches on centre court. At the moment, beating Djokovic here is as hard as beating Rafa in Paris. But Nick makes as compelling an argument as anyone else out there to be able to do it. If he turns tonight into a circus, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the tool that he uses to get over the line. I think that he can sort of bring Djokovic down to his level by doing that. So, look, yeah, Djokovic in 4 feels right, but I'll be praying for otherwise.
What do you think Djokovic will do when Joker has his 20-minute toilet break? Do you think he'll just calmly sit in his seat?
When Nick does?
No, when Joker has his traditional 20-minute toilet break, what do you think Djokovic, Nick is able just to sit calmly in his seat like the Dalai Lama, or he might engage with the crowd? Or
he'll probably call for the supervisor if I had to guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully Nick will put his best foot forward, and he's certainly got way further than anybody on this panel thought he would. Speaking of getting way further, Roddy, Nick being in the final, not the only one, Matt Ebden and Sam Stosur made the mixed finals, and Matt Ebden and Purcell made the doubles. So it's been a great tournament for Australia.
Absolutely fantastic. Stosur and Ebden, they had some really good wins. I think it was the quarterfinal they took out Coco Gauff and Jack Sock. Not a pairing that have played together before, but I'm of the firm belief that Jack Sock remains one of the best doubles players out there. Exceptional half-court player. So that they did really well. The only real shame out of all of that is because Ebden had played, I think, 6 doubles matches in 4 or 5 days leading into that mixed final. And then on the day, he had to play a 5-hour marathon in the semis of the men's doubles. So with all the jubilation and adrenaline and excitement of making the men's doubles final, he's then got to quickly run off to another court and play with Stosur. So it always, under those circumstances, it feels quite difficult to imagine how that he would have been able to turn it around for a win. But nonetheless, great to see Stosur and Ebden teaming up again. They do it pretty consistently, and a great achievement to take home some silverware.
And the doubles got up overnight, so great effort for the Australians in the men's doubles.
Yeah, absolutely enormous. These blokes were on court. They played 28 sets over the course of the tournament. They were on court for 20-something hours. Matt Ebden is a bit of a unique individual, but he's one of the hardest workers out there. Kevin Anderson, the South African, just tweeted saying, couldn't happen to a better bloke. Matt Ebden's the hardest worker on tour. And Max Purcell is a doubles freak. I mean, he made a Aussie Open final with Luke Saville a few years ago, and then obviously was runner-up to the special case at the start of the year. He's got hands as quick and as soft as anyone. So a wonderful achievement. They're now members of the All England Club as champions, and they'll get to enjoy that for the rest of their life. I'm sure tonight will be full of celebrations if they don't start cramping at some point.
So if we look at how we are so far, Kyrgios in the final, Australian pair winning the men's doubles, the mixed doubles runners-up, Aljona Tomljanovic making the quarters. In the women's doubles, Ellen Perez made the quarters. So a terrific tournament as far as Australia is concerned. We've moved a little bit further down the road than Ash Barty's retired. There goes Australian tennis.
Correct. Well, as we were saying before he came to air, Ash who? It feels weird that we're in such a great spot at the moment. I mean, for all the doom and gloom from when Ash retired, and I know we would all agree that it would be fantastic if she was still playing, but this sort of hasn't come about the way it was meant to be. It was meant to be dark, and you couldn't rely on Kyrgios. And Dimonor, he's doing some good things, and some windows are opening up for him. But you didn't necessarily feel like he was ready to take the next step. And for a while there, it looked like John Peers was our only option in the doubles, but we've now got some really great half-court players, and Darius Savills coming back on the women's side, and Jason Kubler's had good results. And there might not be a ton of world-class talent pushing this current crop of players from underneath. But for what we've got at the moment, really, I think we can be really optimistic about what the future holds for the next few years.
And hopefully that will encourage other young Australians to get into tennis.
Exactly. And I think Ash is starting an academy now, if I'm not mistaken, with coach Craig Tyser. So there's certainly every opportunity. It would be good if our calendar included more challenger and futures level events in Australia for the groups beneath, I guess, to be able to spend time at home playing professional tennis rather than having to incur the drain on time and resources and mind, body and soul of traveling so often for so long. But I mean, there are some good young kids coming through, but it's just going to take some time for them to sort of develop. The progression of some of these kids will be halted or stalled by COVID, for many kids not being able to train or not being able to travel and test themselves against the best in the world. But hopefully, this current crop hold on for a fair while, and then the next gen get there eventually.
Okay, Roddy, thanks again for giving us some time and coming on. Always great to listen to your taking apart what's happening on the tennis court. And I'm sure our viewers really enjoy your coverage of it. As I said, we'll get you back to talk US Open shortly before that competition starts. And who knows, with the way this tournament's turned out, maybe we should be aiming a little bit higher for what our expectations are.
Exactly. Thanks for having me on, gents. Always fun. Go Nick. I'll be watching.
All right,
Well
Roddy.
done, Roddy.
See you guys.
All right, Mr. Dalligan, I know you're keen and eager to talk State of Origin Game 3, but round 17 is being played and we probably should give that its due regard. The Sharks demolished the Storm on Thursday night. I watched the game. Not often that you see the Storm shut out in a half of football.
No, and particularly given the late withdrawal of Nico Hines, the Sharks' best player and captain. So there would have been an enormous amount of money, late money invested on the Storm, and they served up a turd, to put it bluntly. There's some real issues there at the Storm, and it's not as easy to say no Munster, no Storm, but it seems that we have to say no Munster, no Storm for all the carry on about Jerome Hughes and some other players. It doesn't seem the Storm are anywhere near top flight without Cameron Munster.
Well, when you say no Munster, no Storm, do you think they're giving some further thought to renegotiating a future contract?
Well, unless there's a Rooster-style salary cap sombrero, they're going to have to try and fit him in when they've already prioritised the three. They had 4 players to prioritise and they prioritised the other 3. So that might have been at the time when he was having some issues. They weren't sure if he'd get his life in order, but they definitely prioritised his halves partner, Jerome Hughes, over him. And that's probably not too he's come out and played sensational since to be clearly the best player in the game. So I think the Storm will be really up in the ante to try to get him to stay. But whether that happens, we will see, because Wayne Bennett, the more and more players he misses out on, the more he'll be sharpening the checkbook. But what is relevant to Storm fans is the Dolphins have just signed Nick Kyrgios from South. Now, he's not exactly Munster calibre, but when you add that to the other halfback they've signed, which is O'Sullivan from the Panthers, that's a capable halves pairing. You wouldn't call it bums on seats marquee pairing, but it seems that they've got a halves pairing at least to be competitive for their first season next year.
Paul, this Munster thing, is this a real tick against Craig Bellamy? I mean, at the start of the year, you told us about this and you thought it was an odd decision, but you were always fairly big on Munster, and now it's quite, the Roosters have come home, that they've now got to backtrack. It seems to me Storm have got to backtrack on their attitude towards Munster, and they put themselves in a position whereby he may very well be the marquee player for the Dolphins. Surely it's a tick against Bellamy.
It is, and the recruitment bosses there, they must have thought that they mustn't have anticipated or envisaged that he would get his life in order. But he was looking like Jordan De Goey is now. If you're running Collingwood, Jordan De Goey could step it up next season or even this season and win the Brownlow. And so then you'd look like a goose if you let Jordan De Goey, or you offered Jordan De Goey $500,000 less than what he's on now, which is exactly what the Storm did. They've had to backtrack. They've increased the offer, but 700 doesn't become 1.2 very easily with salary caps. And there's also the feeling that why didn't you offer me that to start with?
Yeah.
It may be similar to our profession. You perhaps only know your worth when you threaten to leave, but it's not looking like a great decision because he is playing out now. He has been ruled out, Professor. Sorry to jump over, but State of Origin. He's been ruled out of the decider at Suncorp. I just saw that Elvis movie, and it's a bit like losing Elvis, but you've got Darryl Braithwaite coming in at a packed Caesars Palace. So that's what the Maroons are facing with Tom Dearden coming in instead of Munster, who's out with COVID. So as a New South Wales fan, I was ecstatic at the news. But as a sports fan, it's a shame that Munster isn't there because that would have been one of the best rugby league games of all time.
Gee, that's a bit of a downgrade to Darryl Braithwaite, isn't it?
Oh, well, if you wanted Elvis at a packed Caesars Palace and your man come out doing horses, then they'd wonder what else he's got. So he might be a one-trick pony, excuse the pun, and also plays for the Cowboys. I can't do much better than that, Professor.
All right, perhaps finally on the Sharks game on Thursday night, Paul, Craig Fitzgibbon must be the master of understatement. After winning 4 in a row and demolishing the Storm, he said in his press conference it was a pleasing performance.
Oh, he's not easy to impress, as you've seen. Craig Fitzgibbon, I don't think I've ever seen the man smile. So he's a pretty tough disciplinarian, but that's exactly what the Sharks need, and they're seeing the benefits of it. That was a very impressive win, and even Craig Bellamy tipped his hat and said that was out of this world, I think was his phrase, football. So the Sharks are killing it.
Friday night, your Bunnies beat the Knights, Paul, 40-28. The class showed in the end.
It did, and we saw the return of Latrell Mitchell, who was an exceptional player. He captained the team. He had his brother in the team. He was beaming afterwards, as he should have been, and he could lead the Rabbitohs deep into these finals just in the form that he's playing in. We lost our halfback early on, which is normally pretty bad for any team, but he stepped up with Cody Walker, and there's still some firepower in that Rabbitohs team yet. And the Knights are pretty woeful, though. If you saw Adam O'Brien, he's going to be very soon getting the full support of the board, which we all know what that means. So I would say the next coach to go.
He looked really down and out in his press conference. Didn't seem to be much life there at all.
He's probably hoping for some questions about Kyrgios, just to change the topic. But no, he looked out of it, and he won't be there long, I don't think. That Knights team, they're a very proud football town, Newcastle, and they don't stand for mediocrity like that for too long.
He did get some questions about David Klemmer, who was sent off right at the end of the game. Were you looking at Klemmer's eyes? They had the close-up of him. I don't think I would have been running in to dispute something with him.
No, he made Jake the Muss in Once for Warriors look like the Dalai Lama. He's renowned as being one flew over the cuckoo's nest mad, Klemmer. So I wouldn't have been running in either. I'd be running right down Marathon Stadium Road out of the stadium, I think.
Although I must admit, when he was on the ground at the end there, Paul, he would be very happy that Latrell Mitchell missed, because Latrell Mitchell came in like a missile and missed everybody. Now, he could have clearly done some damage if he had hit somebody moving at his pace with his weight.
Oh, well, he came in as the captain to protect his player, I think. I mean, Klemmer would have attacked anyone that he tackled, so he had to be stopped, and that's what Mitchell's defence would be. But, you're lucky nothing landed.
Last night, Paul, the only entertaining thing about the Eels-West Tigers game was that there were 9 tries scored. I didn't see much class in the game. It was more the Eels finally grinding to a win.
You wouldn't be rushing out to back the Eels to win the premiership or to topple the Panthers on that. But perhaps that's the sign of a good team, is to win when you're not playing at your best. Tigers gave it a go. I mean, the Tigers put 20 on the board, so that's a win for them as such. But the Eels just too classy for them in that game.
It showed the ability of the sin bin to affect the momentum of the game, though, with West's Matamua sent off, or sin bin, it changed the whole course of the game, in my opinion.
Well, it was the most polite send-off I've ever seen. He's obviously quite a respectful individual. He apologised to the Fox Sports reporter on the sideline. He apologised to the crowd. He stopped just short of the crowd announcer, putting a message up on the screen to say that he's sorry that he got sent off. So it was touch and go. It was technically a send-off, but there was no malice in it. And he was obviously quite repentful and remorseful, of what he did. It just shows, though, that they're trying at the Tigers. Noddy Kamali's in charge as a caretaker, but they need an experienced coach, I think. But they're going to plump with John Morris, I hear, who's played at more clubs than the living end, and also coached as many as well. Or James Rainey, if you want that analogy. He's probably likely to be their coach next year, John Morris.
All right, that brings us to today, Paul, at 4:00, 7th versus 8. So, as Mark Fiorini would say, a mouth-watering match. The Broncos and the Dragons. Will there be any joy for Kevin Yap at the end of the game?
Well, I tipped the Dragons as underdogs last week, and I'll do it again today. I actually think that they'll win again. The Dragons, they've got a little bit of form going. They've got some interesting players there. Ben Hunt is out, who's their skipper. He's off on State of Origin duties, but I actually think that they may get it done, the Dragons today. So that's very important for them to make the 8. It's a massive game for both teams. So I just think the Dragons will be fired up, and we will see. We will see.
And for those of us who like having a wager on the game, what will the final score be?
I think 22-16 to the Dragons. It will be an entertaining game. Adam Reynolds is the big danger, obviously, for the Broncos.
All right. All of that, though, is the entree for Wednesday night's main meal. New South Wales won. Queensland won. This is the deciding rubber played in Brisbane. Who's going to win that game and why, Paul?
Well, I have to say the head and the heart are now united with Munster out. New South Wales will win the game, and I think they'll do it fairly comfortably. I think 22-10. It's a shame as a sports fan and for any neutrals there that Munster isn't there. But I just think that New South Wales team, which Freddie Fittler's stuck with, he's resisted the urge to make some changes, perhaps putting in Addo Carr, but he's stuck with the team that got it done. And why wouldn't you after that game to belting?
Well, which makes Bellamy's decision even more extraordinary. Not only is it the Storm, but the whole Queensland side depends upon Munster. And you're now saying what was probably a fairly even-handed game has now turned into a probably one-sided game.
Well, you need X Factor to win games like that. Think Wally Lewis. You know, you've got Cherry Evans, you've got Ben Hunt, just workman-like types. You need that eclectic X Factor, which the Blues have got in spades. They're like a Ferrari, the Blues team. So I do not know how Queensland's going to score more teams, and I'm happy to take egg off my face next Sunday. I just don't know how they're going to score more points than that New South Wales, what it has to be described as a Ferrari. It's a freakishly good team.
Paul,
the atmosphere, perhaps, if they go back to the old days of driving past the Caxton pub and the Queenslanders trying to push the bus over, like some war-torn land, then perhaps Queensland might have a chance, but that's not going to happen.
Gelding?
Paul, talking to people in Sydney, it's been, 17 years since they've won up in Queensland to win a cider?
Yep.
Is that right?
I think, yeah, it's about right. Yeah, that'd be right.
Yeah.
So
a bit of a hoodoo to come over there, but as you said, this is a different side and very much dominant players all over the ground.
And there's several things. If they had Wayne Bennett, if they had Cameron Munster, and if they didn't have us coming off such a demolition, then I perhaps would be more worried. And I might have even tipped Queensland if they had Munster. I think that's what they needed. They just don't have the X factor, I don't think, but we'll see.
All right, two final questions, Paul. What will the final score be?
22-10.
And can you get...
And if you want a certain bet, Talakai off the bench, he didn't do it in game 2, but to score, he'll come on late and he'll be like Miley Cyrus on that wrecking ball, and he'll crash over in the second half. That'd be the bet. Talakai to score in the second half.
Okay. Now, Judge, I got a text from you last night during the St Kilda Dockers game. It didn't surprise me because I was watching the game, but it's unusual for you to get to such a state where you actually send me a text. What were your thoughts? What were the thoughts going through your head?
I may have been a bit angry and I may have used a naughty word, Professor, and I hate to do that. But that decision, whereby there's a number of decisions or non-decisions where the umpire gave it away, or did not allow, a perfect tackle by Dan Butler on Jordan Clark of Fremantle. And then a few seconds later, Bradley Hill did exactly the same thing and was tackled by Michael Frederick of Fremantle. So it was actually like for like. We didn't get a free, they did. And Dan Butler, who was the tackle in the first incident, quite naturally said, come on. And the umpire gave away a 50, brought him within 25 metres, siren went, they went from 3 goals up to 4 goals up. Now, I'm not going to say that would have, in and of itself changed the game, but it certainly did change momentum and certainly go Freo the G up. I use a test, Professor, which I call the grand final test. Others use a thing called the pub test. I don't like the pub test because it assumes that everybody in the pub feels the same way about anything. And anybody who's ever been in a pub, go around the pub and see if they got the same opinion on anything. And you'll be very disappointed. So I don't like that test. Put that to a grand final, though, it's in the grand final, and let's just imagine two very friendly and reasonable teams, such as, I don't know, Collingwood and Richmond, playing with their supporters who are entirely intelligent and reasonable people. That happens, exactly that happens, and the grand final is taken away from a team because of that decision, which we saw. I don't know, if the MCG ever wanted to do a renovation, that'd be a good time to do it, because the supporters would just about pull the whole bloody stadium down. I genuinely fear for the health of the umpire who gave that decision. And this dissent rule has got genuinely ridiculous. And as we've spoken about it before, Professor, it's a rule that's, I think, is illegal, invalid. It is not a subsidiary or an interpretive rule of what is actually Rule 18.8.2. It's not the Tax Act now, the AFL rules. And so it's therefore not a valid rule. And I just thought last night was either the high point or the low point. And take an example, Professor, where a player deliberately kicks the ball out of bounds and the umpire doesn't give the free, and another player remonstrates as hard as he can about the decision. You can't give a 50 because there's been no free kick actually awarded. So the rule it doesn't make sense. It was a poorly thought out rule, and I'll tell you, I hate it, and it doesn't pass my grand final test. There you go.
Gelding, have you got any thoughts on it?
Me?
I'd say not.
I saw you have a bit of a chuckle when John started his diatribe about it all.
Oh, well, it happened in the Richmond. Gold Coast game. Rioli gave away a free kick and gave the umpire his views on the decision. And they got a 50 metre, and turned out that game. Look, do we think it's a silly rule, John? Definitely. Is it over the top for all that? Yes, agree with all that, but I don't know. The rule's there.
I'd love to see you, Gelding, be so sanguine if the rule was invoked 70 metres out, Richmond Collingwood grand final, brought Mason Cox into 20 metres and kicked the grand final, won a grand final against you. I'm sure that you'd be saying to the fellow beside you, look, I disagree with the rule, but is there, you would
should the players know more? Like, I understand heat of the moment, stuff like that. Like, I was swearing at the TV when it happened in the Richmond Gold Coast game. Yeah, you could imagine what I thought of the thing, but you don't hear what they say and all that. Look, it's just, to me, it's just a stupid rule, and it's typical of the AFL. We've got a problem, so we'll hit it with a sledgehammer, But do you bring in another rule and say we'll give 15 metres for dissent? No. Or, is the 50 metre rule too far anyway?
Well, Gelding, hang on. As Mark's pointed out, it was so egregious that you were reported for it, you go to the tribunal, get a $2,000, $5,000 fine, but you haven't lost a grand final over it.
Oh, great.
That's what I call the grand final rule.
Yeah.
The grand final test, sorry, because if it's so bad, reported. So it's not that there's no penalty for it, but 50 metres is a penalty to the whole team for a wrong decision in the first place, which is now exacerbated by somebody having an absolute natural reaction of, oh dear, that's not a good decision.
Yeah, but I agree with you, John. I disagree with the 50 metre rule itself.
Yep.
Okay, like completely, and whether it should be 25 metres, that's another whole thing. Yeah. But this is just so typical of how do you become laconic about the whole thing, the AFL. Like, they'll let something go out of control and not do anything for ages. Oh, shit, we've got a problem. Oh, damn, we've got a problem. Let's belt it with the sledgehammer and we'll cut this all out and the problem will go away. No, manage the whole thing properly. As you said, the umpire should be reporting these players if they're swearing at them.
Professor, it's all part of
the hip pocket. What you say makes sense to me.
It's all part of Bill McLaughlin's farewell tour, where he's ticking off every box he wished he'd ticked off in the last 10 years, including Tasmania, women's football, and abuse of umpires. So they have this knee-jerk reaction while Gill's ticking off, oh, yeah, abuse of umpires, tick, done that, good, I can go now. And I think that's why it's been done in such haste and very poorly, in my opinion.
And you had Brad Scott there now in charge of football.
Yeah, good.
You know, really dissent. Have you seen some of the old Brisbane games? Yeah.
Don't get me started on Brad Scott.
Yeah, I know.
I think you agree with that.
And that's where I think, these guys just have gone over the top with all this. The solution you had is right. Report them if they swear, hit them with a $5,000 fine, and then you'll get the Players Association complaining about that. But this is something the AFL has let drift along for years, and then all of a sudden we'll try and kill it in one season.
Yeah,
and the result, as you said, is going to be a grand final, an easy goal, and people will go off their heads, and then the AFL will make some other reaction to it.
Mark?
Yeah, Judge, I'm in agreement with you. 50-metre penalty, too great a penalty on field, and as you say, has the chance to ruin a game. Should be a report, a fine, and if that happens enough to the players and it hurts them in the hip pocket, they're soon going to stop doing it.
And Professor, this is in circumstances where the AFL allows a situation where Dermot Brennan, Yates situation could happen any time in this year's grand final. 3 players could be taken out intentionally by the other player, and there's no red card. They're not sent off the ground. There's no penalty other than a week later. Well, who gives a stuff if you get reported and lose 3 games the next season? It's totally inverted in terms of the seriousness versus the crime.
All right, Gelding, we might finalise today's program with the tips. Before you give us the tips, though, Gelding, a little bit of mishap and mayhem at Caulfield yesterday for punters when I don't think a favourite saluted during the day, did it?
Professor, as we said in our other show, That's Racing, we were worried about the state of the track and what it would throw up yesterday. And, I hope people got the quaddies. The early quaddie paid just under 20,000 and the main quaddie paid over 6,000. And you've got winners paying $20, $15, $18. Millvale got up at $4.40, and that was one of the only ones that was probably in the market. Otherwise, most of the races, they were double figure odds.
Well, great day for the bookies, Gelding.
Yes, they've gone down to the local BMW and Mercedes dealer down the Pean Highway, looking at an upgrade. The bookies, Professor. So we'll see how we go today.
All right, races at Wodonga and Ballarat, Gelding.
Yes, Professor, and not much today. A lot of the ones that I thought would go well were scratched because of the state of the tracks. Smart Poppy got off to a win. $2 favourite, paid $1.80. We got that up at $11.57, Professor. But look, I think Wodonga, if we go race 6, number 6, Fabrica, trained by Ben Hayes, ridden by Lachlan King, round about the $4.50 mark, Professor, each way, may be a good thing. Ballarat, I like race 4, number 7, Sir Phoenix, trained by Matthew Kamani and ridden by Daniel Stackhouse. And we might follow that up a bit with the judge there in race 7, number 2, Just Jono. So trained by Len Smith and Jared Fry. They're all around about the $4 mark, Professor. So hopefully we can make a bit of a recovery from yesterday.
And get ready for next Saturday.
Oh, well, we're here to fight again, Professor.
We are. All right, gentlemen, thanks very much for being on the show today. I'm off to have a paddle pop. I don't know what you guys are going to do.
Professor, the zinger count for Mr. Gelding today was only 8. And in fact, it was actually 7 and 2 halves. And I'm now marking him halves for if we've heard it before. So 7 originals and two older ones. But I thought the replacing Elvis with Darryl Braithwaite was probably worth a couple just in its own. It was good. Good, Paul.
Well, given his best son's horses and he plays for the Cowboys, come on, I can't do much better than that. It could have been worth a triple word score, I think.
Oh, come on, Paul. He's had more songs than horses. What about
you want to rattle through them?
and I thought the Coutta.
What about how's that, Professor?
Yes, how's that?
How's
That
that?
was with a backup band there. That he had endless summer, was it? One summer.
Yeah. And Paul, were you annoyed by Coutta getting into the zinger game with saying that women's tennis is becoming like a Scrabble game? I thought that was good.
Not at all. I don't mind one-liners wherever they come from. So.
All right, gentlemen. Until next week, a very good afternoon to you all.
All right.